Best-selling author Ron Chernow's list of works has revealed details of historical titans easily identified by their surnames: Grant, Washington, Rockefeller. He even inspired a hit Broadway musical, Hamilton. Chernow's new book focuses on another giant, Twain. We talked to him about the book for tonight's interview. How much of an author of his own personality was he, which is to say that he crafted this public persona?
Well, Mark Twain was the original celebrity. I mean, he really kind of anticipates the world of social influencers today, that he had a mastery of media. It was really the birth of mass media. And so we had teams of reporters who were always hungry for fresh and funny and pertinent quotes. And Mark Twain was one of these people who had an opinion on virtually everything under the sun, and it was always funny and always pertinent. What I found was that he was unrivaled when it came to shaping his image in the media. So, for instance, one day, a few years before he died, he suddenly appeared in a white suit in the middle of winter. And the reporters asked him what the white suit represented. He said, well, it's the uniform of the American Association of Purity and Perfection, of which I am the president and sole member. He said, I'm the only cleanly clothed person in a dirty world. And he would do things like that that made him this instantly recognizable personality, so that Mark Twain would walk into a theater or a restaurant and people would stand up and applaud. He also, he used to give interviews from his bed. He would be wearing a nightshirt or maybe an embroidered bathrobe. He'd be smoking a cigar or a pipe. The reporters would cluster around the bed, and Mark Twain would dish to them. And so he knew exactly how his image was going to be projected in the media.
What role does the Mississippi play in the life of Mark Twain and who he became?
Well, you know, Mark Twain's housekeeper, a woman named Katie Leary, said that Mr. Clemens loved the river like it was a woman, and he talked about the Mississippi all the time. In Hannibal, Missouri, which is tucked away all the way in the northeast corner of Missouri, then and now a very tiny town in a rural region, but the Mississippi was his gateway to a larger world, and he said the most exciting event every day in the town was someone would spot the puff of smoke that indicated, you know, that a steamboat was coming. And the steamboat brought the world to their doorstep. And so I think that the river held out the promise of freedom. The river held out the promise of escape to a wider world. So in a way, it's not surprising that he ended up writing Huck Finn, which embodies exactly that fantasy, both for Huck and for Jim. Yeah, the Mississippi launched Mark Twain. Also very, very important is that Missouri was a slave-owning state, and right across the river was Illinois, that was a free state. So it kind of put him right on the fault line of American culture and history. You know, this was the big kind of cultural divide in our history, and the Mississippi represented that. So there was this kind of, you know, east-west access that revolved around slavery, and then kind of, you know, north-south about commerce going up and down the river.
What was the process like of coming to have a handle on Mark Twain and his feelings about race, given where he was from and how he evolved?
Yeah, what I tried to do in the book is completely reconstruct the evolution of his feelings about race and his feelings towards the black community. But what's surprising is how much he grows on this issue. He woos and weds Libby Langdon, who's from an abolitionist family in upstate New York that had been involved in the Underground Railroad. They were friends with Frederick Douglass and Wendell Phillips and all of these towering figures in the abolitionist movement. And his views begin to change. You know, he becomes more of a northerner. He writes Huck Finn, which is still arguably the greatest anti-slavery novel in the language, whatever its imperfections. And then it reaches the point, also around that time, he decides to finance the education of a black law student at Yale Law School. And he was very good friends with the novelist William Dean Howells, who said that no man more detested slavery than Mark Twain. And he said, paying for the education of this black law student, he said, Mark Twain felt personally responsible as a white man. It's a very interesting story because Warner T. McGuinn graduates. He becomes a very, very distinguished lawyer in Baltimore. And there's a young lawyer who occupies the adjoining office, whose name is Thurgood Marshall, who, of course, ended up on the Supreme Court and argued Brown versus Board of Education. And Thurgood Marshall said that Warner T. McGuinn was one of the greatest lawyers he had ever encountered, and had he not been black, he definitely would have been a judge. So you could see kind of the long influence of that decision to finance the education of this black student.